The Churchville Schoolhouse opens the door to the best education in history. Visitors to the Churchville Schoolhouse take a step back in time to watch history unfold in a restored National Register of Historic Places property that dates to the Civil War era. Students of today walk in the footsteps of local farm children from the early days of DuPage County for an authentic living history experience led by a schoolmarm of the early 1900s. A visit to the Churchville Schoolhouse is hands-on, educational, and fun. Participants use slate chalkboards and McGuffey readers for the day's lessons. And children will be asked to follow proper classroom etiquette. Reading, writing, and arithmetic are practiced, and students test their skills during an old-fashioned spelling bee. And of course, no school day is complete without recess featuring games of the early 1900s. The schoolhouse is a popular place for scouts and day camps too. Group visits can also be arranged for service clubs, tour groups, and other adult organizations. The Churchville Schoolhouse Living History program is operated by the Elmhurst Historical Museum. Call the museum today to book a field trip or find out more information. Call 630-833-1457 or visit our website at churchvilleschoolhouse.org. The Churchville Schoolhouse is waiting to open the doors for your school or community group. Plan a memorable learning experience today for the best education in history.
Welcome to Elmhurst Time Travelers. I'm Ken Bartels, your host, and it's October. It's getting colder outside. The autumn leaves are in the air. And at the end of the month, we have something called Halloween. And when I think of Halloween, I think of ghosts. That got me to thinking about Elmhurst ghosts. And so today's program is on ghosts of Elmhurst. And I have two exceptional guests to tell us about those ghosts. Ray Johnston and Kirsten Tillman, and welcome to Elmhurst Time Travelers.
Hi.
And
Thank you.
I want to start off with a pretty basic question for both of you, and that is, how did you happen to get interested in the subject of ghosts in general, not necessarily Elmhurst right off the top?
I'll let
Kirsten,
answer
you want to
first.
start?
Okay, I have a friend, Beth Howe, who has been my friend for 26 years, and we've always been fascinated, by ghosts. And ever since I was a little girl, ever since she was a little girl, and grew up just feeling, that there was something different, about us. I was very empathic as a child, very sensed other people's emotions, things like that. And as I grew up and we became friends, we had that in common. And when she moved back from Texas, we decided to start our own website, paranormalstars.com, and that's how it kind of started.
That's how it started.
Yeah.
And Ray, I think you come at it from a little more pragmatic position.
Yeah, sort of. I mean, I had some experiences when I was a kid, sometime between the ages of 12 and 14, roughly. And I had some experience. I grew up in Cicero, so I had some really strange, what you'd want to call ghost-like experiences that got me interested early on what it possibly could be. But then, life went on. I became a police officer, left police work, and started doing historical research because that was one of my other passions. So I started researching some of the ghost stories and legends or what have you from a fact versus fiction type of standpoint. So it's not that I don't believe that there's something else. I just don't know what that is and can't tell you what that is. But I like to find out what the backstory is on a lot of these quote unquote hauntings.
So when did the interest in Elmhurst begin? or with which one of you, or how did that all start?
Well, I don't know about Kirsten. I know that that with Elmhurst, I had a friend who went to Elmhurst College, and he just graduated a couple years ago. And when I started doing historical research, he actually a producer from the Sci-Fi Channel got a hold of me and said they were looking to do some story for a show called School Spirits. And I don't think I never watched it. I don't know. I think it was on for a season or whatnot. But they had mentioned about they were looking for hauntings that had to do with schools. And this friend of mine had told me the story of the Mill Theater, and so I started researching the backstory of the Mill Theater, and that's how, once I came into Elmhurst and kind of started walking around and getting to know the area, I just noticed there was a lot of neat kind of historical places in a very short distance from one another, and they all have kind of their own neat kind of histories and stories and whatnot. So that's when I thought it would be kind of neat to do a walking tour. And then a friend of mine who was still on the police force had actually got a hold of me and called me up and said, "Hey Ray, you still doing that ghost stuff?" And like I could hear his eyes rolling in the back in his head. And he said, "You know, a good friend of mine's wife and one of her friends are paranormal investigators, and they want to get a chance to talk to you." So that's how I met Kirsten and her friend Beth. So.
Okay, and so it didn't start out in Elmhurst necessarily.
No.
Okay.
Actually, we did Beth and I did a tour in Naperville for a year. And then once we decided to move on from that, that's when my husband's best friend, who used to work with Ray at West Chicago, told us about Ray. And so we said, hey, we'd like to really meet him. And so we did. And we asked if we wanted to get together and do a historical paranormal tour. And it worked out really well for the last 3 years now. It's great.
Now, Elmhurst as a community dates back approximately to 1836. That's the date we used for the sesquicentennial.
Sure.
Is that old enough to have good ghosts?
I don't know. There's a time limit because
right.
I don't write the rule book as far as what ghosts do or decide to do or what not to do or what they're allowed to do. The way I always say that you can't have a ghost story without some history, because someone has to be history in order for there to be a ghost story. So I don't think there's really a time limit.
Is there such a thing as a normal ghost? And I understand the oxymoron of that statement, but do they have patterns? Do they fall into types?
I mean, I just know from the reading that I've done that there are supposedly different types of ghosts, and some are what they call residual hauntings, which are, if you go into ghost theory, and there's a lot of theories out there, but a residual would be something that doesn't interact with the person. It's more of a recording that replays over and over again. So that would be like a residual haunting. And then there's poltergeist. Everyone, if you've seen the movie Poltergeist, it's just German for noisy ghost, and those aren't necessarily ghosts that you see, but that you feel the results of. They throw things, bang stuff around. They disturb things. Right. I mean, you can go into all different kinds. So is there a normal ghost? I don't know how to really answer that.
Were you going to answer that?
I was just going to say,
So.
that's okay. With EVPs that I've collected, I feel that Elmhurst has residual and intelligent hauntings. Residual being being taped, like a tape recording over and over again, where it's not really interacting with you. But an intelligent ghost, for lack of a better word, would be something that would interact with you. And so I don't feel that there is any normal, maybe stereotypical type of ghost or haunting, because they're all, very different, I would think, but I don't think there's a specific kind, in Elmhurst.
The introduction of ghosts into what we might describe as normal life comes in interesting progression, it seems to me. I remember Casper the Friendly Ghost. I remember he hung out with some folks that weren't necessarily all that friendly. And then you progress right on through the scariest ghosts you can think of.
Right.
But do ghosts tend to be friendly and or sinister necessarily by type? You both have indicated several different types. I mean, I understand the poltergeist, they like to
mischievous.
Yeah.
Kind of type of ghost.
Are they necessarily good or bad?
That's a good question. I think it just depends on the experience the person who's experiencing it has. So, I mean,
Okay.
there's been negative experiences. I mean, the Bell Witch obviously is one of the more famous ones, where supposedly, this poltergeist happened to actually poison people. And then there was, then there's just the feeling like we do with let's say, the Gloss Mansion, where the people who supposedly saw the ghost of Lucy Gloss feel more that she's more of a caretaker, and they don't feel frightened or threatened by her, at least according to the people in the Elmhurst Press in the 1960s. But so I guess I would say there are different types of ghosts, as there would be different types of ghost experiences.
I've definitely had, more positive and certainly more negative experiences. Like, for instance, the Crane Sanitarium, which is now a big field, of course, is an absolutely, and of course, in my opinion, I think, and I can speak for you as well, there's something that really seems very negative associated with the place. There are places where I've gone to where it feels absolutely almost terrifying, really scary, where you just don't even want to be there, which was actually the Crane Sanitarium for me and Beth, particularly. But then you go to other places like the Mausoleum, where you really don't feel uneasy, yet you still find things, but you don't feel uneasy, and you don't feel like you're threatened or that you want to leave.
Okay. Have you seen ghosts?
I have seen what I would call a shadow, and it appeared to be a male. It certainly felt that way as far as feelings go. But I was actually in my room, and this was probably one of the most poignant experiences I've ever had. Whereas it was nice. I was still awake, hadn't fallen asleep yet, so I wasn't like in that twilight state, where you can, might hallucinate or something like that, right? And it appeared to be coming towards me, and I literally, my husband was next to me, he was sleeping. And it went like this. I wasn't sure what I was seeing. I wasn't positive because it was dark, but we had some light in the room, just a very, very little bit. But anyway, and it almost looked like it moved back. I thought it had dissipated and gone away. I turned over, went to bed, just tried to ignore it. And the covers came off of my shoulder. And that was very disturbing. That's not something, it was the first time I'd ever experienced anything like that. And I looked over at my husband to see if he had been moving, because covers can do that, right? You can move. But no, he was sound asleep and hadn't moved at all. And I, again, tried to ignore it, and it happened another time. And then I turned over, and then I do a St. Michael prayer. And I did that 3 times, actually, before I felt more at ease. And then it went away, and it didn't happen again that night. So that was a very interesting experience.
I know with me personally, like I said, I had most of my ghost experiences as a kid. And one was, I don't want to get into a long story, but one was an actual physical manifestation that was as real as you and I are here. And the more I talk to people that have had ghost experiences, they don't realize until afterwards that it was actually a ghost experience, because typically they don't appear as these misty white things like you see in the movies. It's not until afterwards they go, oh, I think I saw a ghost, even though it looked like a human being at the time. So I had one of those situations where I saw a female along with my brother. We'd seen her at the same time within minutes at different times in the house in Cicero. And then another time, I guess it would be more like a poltergeist, where my kitchen window had blown in on top of me and covered me with glass one night, and it's a long story. But so I've had some, kind of odd experience, but not since that age. So.
Now, I know you brought some audio. Now, what are we about to hear?
Well, I started with the Mill Theater. I have a couple of EVPs. I'm not sure how many you'd like to hear, but I do have a few, and they're pretty creepy. I would say some of the more creepy EVPs that we have.
Okay. Let me stop you there and say, after when we come back from break, as I shared with you already, I want to hear from you your personal top ghost stories. But we should probably introduce just a smidgen of the Mill Theater story before we listen to the audio.
Absolutely.
So, which one of you wants to tell the David Payne story?
the famous or infamous David Payne story. Well, when I got into it, my friend had told me about the Mill Theater and that it was haunted, but he didn't tell me the story behind it. He put me in contact with 5 or 6 students at Elmhurst College who had experiences at the scene shop, actually, not the actual Mill Theater. They're 2 separate buildings. And the students I talked to said that they had experienced cold spots, that they had heard footsteps when they were alone in the building at night. very kind of typical ghost type of things. One person said they saw a shadow person, which is basically one of these little subcategories of ghosts that look like a shadow and shaped like a person, but not your typical ghost. So they all 5 of them told about the same story, and then I had asked them, because I always want to know, why do you think it's haunted? You know, it's nice that you had the experiences, but why? And one student had told me that she thought someone had fallen down the elevator that was in the scene shop. And then another student said that they thought it was due to some industrial accidents that may have occurred when it was a mill. So nobody had told me the story of David Payne. So I had no clue about David Payne. And until I talked to Alan Weiger.
Alan Weiger is the director of the theater and longstanding faculty member at Elmer's College.
Right, that I came to find out. And you always worry when you call someone and want to talk to them about a ghost story that they're going to hang up on you or whatnot. But he was very nice and said, well, the students don't know the story, I know the real story. So he told me the story of David Payne from what he remembers. And he said when he was a student, the story goes is that there was a young technical director hired in the late 60s that was very young. He came from Michigan, and that they were putting on a play called The Marriage of Figaro, a light opera, he called it. And that Elmhurst has an interim term, which is a shortened term, mainly in January after the fall and before the winter, or before the spring term starts. And the idea being that they were going to start the pre-production on the play before Christmas break and then pick up after Christmas break to get this thing done by the end of January. And so after Christmas break, all the students file back into the Mill Theater. One of the students goes up to the second floor of the scene shop to meet with David and get all the directions and blueprints and whatnot. And then he meets the rest of the students back in the theater, starts handing out assignments. The students go, kind of give him a strange look, and he's like, well, why are you all looking at me like that? And the students, at least one of the students says, well, you didn't hear what happened to David. And he said, no, what happened? He said, he was killed over Christmas break. So that was the infamous story of David Payne. Of course, I did some research. I don't take anything for granted. You know, police work, we always say, in God we trust, and everybody else needs identification. So, I met with the archivist over at the library, and we started going through old yearbooks and theater programs, and come to find out there was a David Payne. He did exist. He was hired in the summer of '67, and he did die during Christmas break. He died on Christmas Day. 1967. So the whole story kind of checked out, at least the backstory. But the thing that kind of amazed me is that the students who didn't know the story of David Payne all pointed to the second floor of the scene shop for some reason. And that is supposedly where the original student had met with David Payne in his ghostly form, if you want to call it that. So I thought that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, I was fortunate enough to be a administrator at Elmer's College for several years, and heard that story rather early on in my tenure, and went to the scene shop and experienced visiting there. Let's put it that way. But and the story was all well and good, and every community should have a good ghost or two.
Sure.
But the byproduct of the story that I heard, that I'm sure you did as well, was at some point in time the mill was being renovated. I don't even know when that is, maybe you do. And as they were moving something that hadn't been moved in decades, they find one thing underneath this massive collection where they keep props and what have you. Sure. And I know you know the story, so you might as well finish.
Maybe not. Which I
they
didn't hear
found they found David Payne's membership card in the Thespian Association.
Oh, yeah.
It was the only thing under something that hadn't been moved for decades.
Now, see, I didn't hear that story, but what I did hear is that, you know, we'd give the tour usually during nice weather, obviously, it's a walking tour, and we just happened to be there a homecoming weekend, and we had just missed, and I don't plan on missing it this year, we had just missed a group of theater students who supposedly were contemporaries of David Payne.
Ah, okay.
So I would love to talk to one of those original students, but when I was there, I was talking to the current technical director. I didn't get his name. He said, I'm the current technical director. He said, I have to show you something. And he ran back into the scene shop, and he said he went into the vault, and he brought out a plaque, and it's got David Payne's thespian card, and it says resident theater ghost on it, which I thought was very cool. So at least they're embracing, you know, the creepiness.
Oh, they
embrace
do.
the creepy.
Yes.
So But I didn't know the story behind how they came
Yeah,
about that card. So.
That's as I understand
That's
or
very
remember,
interesting.
or remember the story. So it has that sort of that additional twist.
Sure, that's pretty good.
Now we're back to
Okay.
the audio.
Yes.
So
Okay.
you know,
Do you mind if go
we're
ahead.
we're in the Mill or the where are we?
Well, we'll be doing the Mill Theater, and Beth and I had the luxury of actually going in there for an hour because we were lucky enough to have a young lady who, as we were investigating that night, a young lady come around the corner and go into the building, and it's very cool.
That was a scene shop though, not the theater, right?
Right. I'm sorry, the scene shop. And we were able to go in there for a complete hour. So it was really neat. The first one, I'll preface this a little bit for you. It says, the EVP says he owns you, and it will recycle it, it'll keep going. He owns you. And this EVP actually occurred at the time when the young lady named Ashley was telling us about an antique mirror that that her mother bought at an antique store and brought it home. They had issues at home. I mean, like paranormal issues at home. So they were kind of frightened by it, but very fascinated by it at the same time. Brought it back to the Mill Theater, said, well, we'll take, they'll take it. They'll put it in the scene shop, right?
Right.
So it's fine. So then she kept saying she was, really drawn to it. And we were telling her, maybe you should stay away from the mirror. There are some people who believe that antique mirrors are very, scary and that lead into other demonic dimension, areas and things like that we want to stay away from. That being said, as we were talking about this mirror, I get this, he owns you, and it's a very, very creepy. It sounds like a male voice, and I'll just show it to you now.
We do that one again?
Yes, we can. He owns you is what it says.
Okay. And that's emanating from in the vicinity of the mirror or
yes,
in the space?
Where exactly we were standing. And I did not hear this, and neither did any of the other two ladies. And there were only 3 of us in there, and we were all female. And to me, that doesn't sound like a female. So it was very, very, very creepy.
Now you have a second one? You
I
said?
do, actually.
And
yes.
the same location or same?
I don't believe it was the same. No, actually, this one is really interesting. It's actually in the beginning before we were let in to the building. Beth and I were discussing, David Payne and things like that, and trying to elicit some sort of, conversation, right? This young lady comes around the corner, goes in. Beth and I look at each other and thought, wow, we need to go in there. And literally, this EVP comes right before we open the door, and it says, "Let them in, girl, open it."
Okay. Well, we're going to have to go to break here
Yes,
in just
of course.
in just a few seconds. And this is as good a place to break as any. But
Right.
when we come back from break, I want to know how... the first one you played, I can kind of a semblance of He Owns You.
Yes.
Okay, I can piece that. I have a little trouble coming through this, and I want to know how you arrive at the conclusion.
Yeah, of course.
But we've got to go to break, and then we'll be right back.
Okay.
This is Elmhurst Time Travelers, and we're on kind of a ghostly trip, this program, and we'll be right back.
Visit elmhurst.org to explore the new City of Elmhurst website. Find out the latest Elmhurst news, pay utility bills and parking tickets, report concerns, and much more. Elmhurst.org is an ideal way to discover what Elmhurst offers your business, your family, your life.
The Elmhurst Historical Museum, located in downtown Elmhurst, is proud to present award-winning exhibits for visitors of all ages. Our Adult Tea Time Talk series, family programs, and special events make learning about history interesting and fun. Admission is free, and on-site parking is available. Visit the Elmhurst Historical Museum soon. Call us today, or go to our website for the latest program details.
Welcome back to Elmhurst Time Travelers, and we're talking about Elmhurst ghosts with Ray Johnson and Kirsten Tillman. And Before we went to break, Kirsten, you played one of your EVPs.
Yes.
So I think the first thing we need to do is, what's an EVP?
Okay.
And then we're going to listen to that one again.
Okay. EVPs is an electronic voice phenomenon. It's what we're trying to do is capture voices that are not our own and in a different realm, so to speak. That's why we also call ourselves voices from beyond. So it's literally on a different frequency wavelength than what our voices are when you're listening to an audio on a recording. So. Okay.
And you're recording this with what kind of device?
Honestly, this was with a cell phone, literally with a cell phone.
Okay.
Yeah. Right. You can use anything that has
Let's hear that last one again. And it's saying what again?
It's saying, let them in, girl, open it.
Okay.
That's what I hear.
This is outside the Mill Theater at Elmhurst College.
Yes.
Okay. Now, how do you go from that to let them in, girl?
Literally, as I'm listening to the audio, I have my headphones on. I'm listening to every second of every minute of every hour of a tape recording, and it goes on and on. And it takes a very, very long time to do all these. And I hear it over and over and over again. Once I decide that, okay, this is an EVP, because it's definitely different than our voices. It's obviously something, different. So and there are times where I actually try to accentuate the noise, the noise or the voice, and I might even try to lower our own, so that there's not too much background noise. You want to be able to hear what it is I'm hearing. And once you hear it over and over again, some of them are harder to decipher than others, but I finally decided upon, based on what I thought I was hearing, is that let them in, girl, open it.
Well, we've all watched the various crime shows on TV where they take snippets and slow it down or speed it up or clean it up and all the stuff that they do.
Play it backwards.
We're still at the Mill Theater.
Yes.
You have one that may be David Payne himself?
Right. I'm always of the belief that whatever might be speaking in the microphone or of my tape recording device, if it's an intelligent, being talking, I actually believe that whatever it is can lie to you lie to me as easily as I can lie to you. So I always take what I hear with a grain of salt, but it actually does say Dave. That's Dave. Yes.
Okay, let's listen to that one.
Okay.
I think a technical director of some kind.
Yeah.
He died, and he lives here.
Okay, that's what we've been told. David Payne is his name.
Yeah.
Yes.
I think a technical director of some kind.
Yeah.
He died, and he lives here.
Okay, that's what we've been told. David Payne is his name. Yes.
I think a technical director of some kind.
Yeah.
He died, and he lives here.
Okay, that's what we've been told. David Payne is his name.
Yeah.
Okay. So that's Dave, yes, is the EVP, and there is a laugh at the end, actually, that is not either of ours as well, or Ashley's.
Now the laugh I can make out. Now
Yeah,
I'm kind
I
of
can
like
make
in pain.
a laugh
Sometimes
out, too.
it's hard to interpret because you may hear something, someone else may hear something else.
Right, exactly.
But some of it is hard to really, like with the laughter. I mean, that's definitely laughter, and you would have known if any of you three were laughing.
Yeah,
or
no,
if
we
there
were
was
having
something
a
funny going
conversation
on.
at the time. Yeah.
So I always think it's kind of difficult.
Well, the two of you are involved with the Voices from Beyond tours, which is a haunting tour. I mean, however you describe it within Elmhurst, and we'll get back to that in a few minutes. But because of that fact, both of you are extremely familiar with Ghosts Beyond David Payne and the Mill Theater. So I guess I simply would ask you to share a few ghost stories in town that people might be aware of. You've mentioned the Crane Sanatorium, which I agree. I thought that was a pretty creepy place.
You wouldn't be the only
But
one.
it was in great disrepair too,
Right.
so that tends to go hand in hand. But stories.
Well, I like the story I like is about the Wilder Mansion. Now it's called the Wilder Mansion, and most people are familiar with it. Park District owns it,
Right.
or takes care of it, and they do weddings and banquets and
do.
whatnot there. But I really like the story behind, before it was the Wilder Mansion, when Seth Wadhams owned it. Just to give you some background on some of the stories we have heard, and of course read, other people have written about the Wilder Mansion. And most of the stories that we've heard revolve around a female figure. at least the ones we've heard personally. One tour goer who had actually been on one of the tours said that her grandmother used to do research at when the Wilder Mansion was the Elmhurst Library from 22 till when the new library was put in, I think in 2003. So it was a library for a really long time. She said her grandmother was researching the Holocaust. That was kind of her thing. And this woman, young lady in a period dress, is the way she describes it, came up to her and asked her what she was reading. And as she turned to grab one of the books to show her, she turned back and the woman was gone. So the stuff that we've read online and I've heard mentioned in other things always point to Seth Wadhams, who was the original owner, being upset for some reason that his original homestead was used as a library. And that was kind of the backstory that I had read. But until I started getting into the Seth Wadhams family, was when it really got interesting to me, because Seth Wadhams was the original owner. Well, he built the property there. They called it White Birch in 1865. And he brought his wife Elizabeth and his older daughter Emma, an adopted son Frederick, and a young son named Dana, who passed away before they moved into the White Birch residence. Emma and Dad, Seth, had a falling out that was well covered by the Chicago Tribune because he had money, and people like to hear when people with money have bad things happen in their life for some reason. It hasn't changed much today, so now we have the internet to read all the gossip. But anyway, so Emma had divorced her first husband, Ed Loring, who Seth had set her up with. He wasn't happy about that. She was living in Peoria with him and then eventually moved back to Chicago after she divorced him and was going to marry a guy named Walter Colton. That's when Seth kind of put his foot down and said, if you marry this other gentleman, don't ever darken my doorway again. And so Emma said bye, and she left and kind of did a little flitting around with this new husband. But Seth kind of wrote her off. And Elizabeth, his wife, kind of put the bug in his ear that, you know, I've lost one son long ago, and now I've lost a daughter. And so he hired private investigators to find Emma. It never happened. Both Seth and Elizabeth died before they ever knew whatever happened to Emma. Now, when Seth died, he left a lot of money to different charitable organizations. One of them was the Old People's Home in Chicago, and that's not my name. That's what it was actually called, the Old People's Home. And he donated $25,000 to this organization. And in 1911, a 61-year-old woman shows up in Chicago looking for a handout, and her name is Emma Wadhams Green. So she'd gone through 3 husbands at this point. Third husband was out of work and disabled, so she had nothing to live on. And the person who took her information said, Emma Wadhams Green, are you in any relation to Seth Wadhams? And she said, well, yes, that was my father. And he said, well, he donated quite a bit of money, and if you sign this paperwork, we'll give you a couple dollars to live on a week. And that's when Emma got smart and said, no, I'm not signing anything, hired an attorney. And after 3 years, they convinced the courts that the money that was originally given to the Old People's Home should revert back to Emma. And she got $86,000 out of the deal. Now, when she passed away a couple years later, she wanted to be buried with the Wadhams family, but the Wadhams descendants, other than herself, would not allow her to be buried in the Wadhams plot. I mean, she had really been written off. And so they eventually got a hold of some relatives of her second husband, and they opened up the grave at Graceland Cemetery, where she has a young son buried there, Bob Colton, who died at a young age. And so she's not buried where she should have been, or where she wanted to be. And her father's, parting words were, "Don't ever come back to the house." So when you look at some of the stories we've heard from librarians about a mischievous spirit moving things around that shouldn't be, or in a period dress, there's a good argument that Emma found her way home against her dad's wishes and got some money she wasn't supposed to have. So, so it figures in well to some of the stories we've heard.
Kirsten?
Well, I will say, I think it's really based on my and Beth's experience, on the Crane Sanitarium. I would say that's very intriguing. The story behind it's intriguing as well. How it became a transient hotel, and there were certainly unsavory things that occurred at there as well. But going into our experience, the reason I've chosen it, was just it's amazing how an open field can make you feel so unnerved. We really actually didn't want to do the investigation. We both literally talked about just saying, Ray, too bad. Too bad, so sad. Because, we just were so uncomfortable. It was a particular location for myself and a particular location for her in that field. And I was gravitated towards the side where I think their townhomes are over there. And we also got some very intriguing EVPs from that location as well. And it was really almost terrifying, where you just felt, you know, kind of closed in and claustrophobic, even though you're in this big open space, you know. So I think that's why I chose the Crane Sanitarium. And there's even an EVP, and I won't, you know, put it on the air here, but it's a disturbing one, you know. And it actually talks about
Well, it was a building that looked like it should have been on a movie set.
Right, yeah,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, it was red or passed for red. It was spires and towers and windows and doors, and it was like, oh, why is that there?
Yeah.
But interesting. Now, I know also, and it's on the tour because I went to the website, the Gloss Mausoleum, which a lot of people, you know, they drive down Robert Palmer Drive and they look to their right if they're going north, and they see this building, and I'm sure a lot of folks had no idea what it was. Although Time Travelers, one episode ago, we actually went there briefly.
Very good.
So more people hopefully know now. But my own personal observation of that building is that Henry's name is on it, but Lucy's name is not even on the place where she resides.
Right.
So that might have her pretty upset from the beginning. But I know it's on the tour. So why is it on the tour?
Well, I love the history. So,
sure.
you know, and if you know, people learn about history through ghost stories or however they do it, it's fine with me.
Right.
I love the story of Henry. I love his personality, and we may not have time to go. You could do a whole 6 shows on Henry Gloss and his personality. But I mean, first of all, it's the only mausoleum I'm aware of, at least in the state of Illinois, that exists outside of a cemetery. So, I mean, how could you have a ghost tour and not go past the only mausoleum? Now, I've not heard one ghost story about it, as odd as that would seem. You know, you've got this mausoleum sitting out in the middle of town. You'd think it'd be full of ghost stories surrounding it, but we haven't talked to one person. In fact, what we've gotten from people is that it's just very peaceful, it's pretty, it's well lit up at night, one of the best night photos you're ever going to get in Elmhurst. So I couldn't pass it up. So it's on the tour. There's no ghost stories associated with it.
It's just an interesting place to go.
It's just a very interesting place to go. And people love it. I mean, it's just that once they find out it's a mausoleum, you know, as they're walking up to it, they just think it's a really neat, kind of pretty park building. So
Let's talk about the tours. When did they? Well, first of all, when did they start, and how do people find out about them? Because it is October after all.
Sure. Do you want to?
Oh, okay. Well, they literally about 3 years ago is when we hooked up and we decided to do it. So it's been 3 years. It's our 3rd year running.
Okay.
You can go to www.voicesfrombeyondtours.com. You can also call. There's a phone number on there, and you can call, or you can also sign up online as well.
Right. So it's running Friday and Saturday nights through
Yes.
October 25th.
From
Friday
8
and
o'clock.
Saturday
Yeah.
nights.
Starting
Now,
at
some
8
of them are
o'clock.
already booked solid. We try to keep it within a manageable group. So, but you can check the.
And they're walking tours.
Yes, they are
Yes.
walking tours.
Yes, dress for the weather.
Dress for the weather. Wear comfortable shoes.
And there aren't any restrooms that are available on the walk. A lot of people ask that too. So.
And you already mentioned some are booked, so a successful venture. People
Yeah.
have interest in such things.
And yeah, you generally find, what we found anyway, is that you have about a 50-50 group almost every time you go out. And it's funny because you get feedback from people. You know, the age of the internet, everyone's going to make their comments or whatnot. And you've got 50% of the people saying there needs to be less ghosts and more history, and 50% of the people saying there needs to be less history and more ghosts.
Right.
So I always say the ghosts don't work for us. We don't pay them anything, so we can't guarantee whether or not they're going to show up on any one of the tours. So.
Right. Well, and also it's really nice. You can almost pay more for a movie. For the movies, no, seriously. And then there's a nice video at the end that I created with all our locations and the EVPs attached to those locations.
Right.
Now we're getting tight on time, but I know the cemeteries,
Yes.
St.
Peter's and St. Mary's.
St. Mary's. I know they're on the tour. They're not that far from the Mill Theater. You mentioned something earlier that I did want to come back to. That
What's that?
it seems like there seems to be an area. I mean, Crane Sanatorium's not very far from
No.
Right.
the Mill Theater, the cemeteries. I mean, something going on here?
You got me. But
know, but-
you tell me if there's something going on. No, but I just thought it was a neat, I mean, Elmhurst is an older town, and there's a lot of stories that accumulate over the time, and there's a lot of neat buildings still there, like the Wilder Mansion. Unfortunately, the Crane Sanitarium was torn down in 2003, which was kind of sad, but I would have liked to have seen it
Me too.
redone and turned into a bed and breakfast or something, something nice. But
Yeah, there's those two cemeteries owned and operated by separate churches and separate organizations, and then there's a small little corner that actually is owned by the college.
see, I wasn't aware of that.
A small little corner, and the third president of the college who died in office is buried in that little corner.
Neat.
So, I mean,
I had no idea.
no ghosts associated with
Sure,
it as far
sure,
as I know.
sure,
I mean,
sure.
But it's just, once again, history, legend, ghosts, stories, the whole 9 yards. So, do you both actively, you're looking for new things
Oh,
consistently?
absolutely.
then?
I mean, it
and
never,
not just in Elmhurst.
no,
Right.
no,
Right.
and not necessarily all ghost related.
Sure.
I mean, historically, but I mean,
Maybe
history is
a
always
vampire or two.
history. I'll probably stick clear. I mean,
yeah.
we won't say anything, but I mean, I'll probably stay clear of the vampires, especially since the whole sparkly vampire came.
Absolutely.
Once they got
Yes.
sparkly, I lost interest in vampires. So, but yeah, history is always being rewritten. So there's always more work to do. There was one person who said, there still needs to be more research done. I'm like, absolutely. There's so much research, but so little time. So, but we're always looking for new. In fact, there's a couple suggestions that a couple tour goers had mentioned that I'm researching now that I can't mention
Sure,
yet.
of course.
But because I have to talk to the owners and whatnot. But there's constantly new stories coming up all the time.
Now, I noticed you brought a couple of books. You might as
Yeah,
well
I did.
reference them.
Sure, why not? Actually, the first book I'd written was Chicago's Haunt Detective, and that came out in 2011, and that was something that I just go into Chicago legends and fact versus fiction type of thing.
Certainly.
And the second one that deals, there is a couple stories in Elmhurst in the Chicago history of the stranger side, which I talk about the Wadhams family and the Wilder Mansion. But this has more of a historical twist to it. Columbia Next.
Now, did the two of you then partner on the? You find them, you research them, you find them.
It's a
however it
team
works.
effort.
Yes.
It's a team effort. So if I come across something, I'll let Kirsten know, and Kirsten and Beth will do their investigation, and I'll do the research and see what we come up with. So
Now, I have to ask,
yes.
what will you be doing on Halloween?
Hopefully, I will be going to his party.
Oh,
Yes.
as you have a
can guess,
party, obviously.
as you can guess, I try to leave October 31st free of any talks or tours or goings on, because we've had a party at our house, and I live in Brookfield, so I have a party that we've had since about 1990. So we've had people come over on Halloween, kind of an open house type of thing. And I do a lot of decorating and like to scare the neighbor kids.
Right. Well, I'll also be taking my kids out first,
Abs-
Yeah, after that.
Well, thank you both. We are officially out of time, which I warned you would happen very
I know.
quickly.
It's okay.
But just the website again is?
VoicesFromBeyondTours.com.
Okay, and folks in Elmhurst can go there and perhaps sign up for an interesting tour and learn a little bit more about their home community.
Exactly.
Thank you both.
All right.
Thank you.
Appreciate it very
Nice
much.
meeting you.
You bet.
Thank you.
I'm Ken Bartels. This has been Elmhurst Time Travelers, and we've been talking about ghosts, and it's been really fascinating. And we will see you again.
Hi, I'm John Quigley, President and CEO of the Elmhurst Chamber of Commerce and Industry. In these challenging economic times, it's imperative that our residents and businesses band together to not only shop Elmhurst, but buy Elmhurst whenever possible. We have great stores in our city center, Spring Road, Butterfield Road, York and Villette Streets, St. Charles and Route 83, North Avenue and Lake Street, along North York and even Grand Avenue. I ask for your help. Let's keep our tax dollars in Elmhurst.